Hey guys, welcome back into Legacy. So today I just want to do a quick video on skill use and uh, roles and all that kind of stuff, and when to use them, how to use them, when it's appropriate to reapply, when to allow players to re-roll skill use, that kind of stuff. And this is how I roll my table. By all means, feel free to disregard anything that doesn't make sense to you. As it says in the description, this is just my opinion, guys. Take, leave what matters to you, because this is something that I learned. I'm going to say about 15 years ago when I picked up Burning Wheel. So this all starts with Burning Wheel. It starts with Luke Crane. Burning Wheel created and put into writing a rule called the Let It Ride rule, um, which basically says that skill rolls should ride unless circumstances change to dictate a reroll. And that's the basis for how I handle skill rolls uh, in totality at this point. Um, no unlimited rerolling, no just picking up dice whenever you want. But before we get into that part of it, I just want to kind of explain how I do skill rolls, what they're used for, kind of why I use them, the way I use them, and then we'll get into how rerolls work and stuff for me. Um, so skill rolls should only be rolled when there's a chance for failure. That's the first big thing. If you're rolling skill rolls just to roll, then you're kind of diluting the purpose of the skill roll. With that being said, the dice should never be picked up and rolled unless a GM tells you to do it. Um, and the reason I say that is the GM is the final educator of whether or not something can or should happen. And they should be the ones telling you what to roll. You should never be telling the GM what you're going to roll. So, like, if you want to pick a lock, you don't go, well, I'm going to pick a lock and just roll, pick a lock. There could be a lot of circumstances around it that you aren't aware of that prevent you from picking a lock. Um, or alternatively, the GM may want more information before you roll so he knows what bonuses, penalties, all that kind of stuff to apply to the roll. Are you using a lockpick set? Are you brute forcing it? What is going on? Don't just roll the dice because you can. The GM needs to be the person to say, okay, you're going to pick the lock. This lock is a magical lock, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to give you a -5 penalty to the roll, even though you're using lockpicks, so that's going to offset that. So go ahead and give me the roll. That's how rolls should be done on skill rolls. Never should just be rolling because you want to roll, because the GM needs to know exactly what you're rolling for, what you're rolling against. He needs to know the circumstances of the rolls. And that goes double for things like diplomacy or charming people. The dice do have an aspect to that, but you need to really explain to the GM how you're approaching the charm, the diplomacy, the intimidation. Because if you just say, well, I'm going to charm them, well, okay, that doesn't mean anything to me. What does it look like? How are you charming them? Say you're playing a female character in, say, a 1920s Call of Cthulhu game, and you're trying to charm some information out of somebody. Maybe you hike up your dress a little bit, and you tug your top down just a little bit to show a little more cleavage, whatever. And because you know the guard is a goon, and he's going to be distracted by something like that. Those things matter, because again, those can also be converted into bonuses to the roll. They can be converted into circumstantial bonuses. You need to tell the GM what you're doing. The GM needs to tell you what the roll is going to be. Otherwise, the game just becomes about dice. It's not really storytelling at that point. It's just about dice. And if you have a high enough bonus, then it really doesn't matter, especially in games where some of the bonuses can get really ridiculous. I'm thinking Pathfinder, D&D, games like that, where you can get +20, +30 to the roll. And it literally becomes superfluous to roll the dice, because anything but a 1 is going to be a success. That's the big thing with me with rolling dice. That's when you roll dice. Why do you roll dice? You roll dice because there's a chance that the failure could cause complication. You're trying to stealth past a guard, and if you fail, you're going to get caught, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. You're trying to charm your way into a gala. If you don't, then you're not going to get access to the NPC you need. That's why you're rolling the dice. You're rolling the dice because there's a chance for failure. You're rolling the dice because you need to know what success and failure actually means from an actual in game perspective. Um, it's simple to break it down to say pass fail, because realistically, skill rolls, generally speaking, are pass fail. But if you're looking at them realistically and you're using them realistically, it's more than just pass fail. It's consequences on both sides. There's good consequences. There's negative consequences. Um, so, when you roll a dice, why you roll a dice, and then there's always going to be how do you roll skill rolls. This is going to probably be just a tad bit controversial, but this is how I tend to do it, guys. I want the dice out, kind of, lack of a better way, in the open. Um, I want you to put the dice um, in front of the table. The reason for that is I want the table to be able to react to your pass failure. Because it can change the next action another player characters can take. It can change what I'm going to do as a GM. Furthermore, it also prevents things like fudging and cheating. Uh, it's just how you should do it. You should always be in the open with your rolls. I fudge that a little bit with online play because online play is a little different. But if I'm sitting at a table, I want you rolling in the open. I don't want you rolling behind screens. I don't want you rolling behind your hands. I want to see the dice roll. And for the record, as a GM, I tend not to use screens. I tend to roll in the open as well. Just so people know that I tend to roll in the open as a GM, so you will know what I'm rolling. And when you're playing, and how you roll the dice is important. I'm not going to get into, you have to hold your hands. Yeah, that's not what the how is about. The how is about what does it look like when you actually sling dice at the table. It should be in the open. It should be interpretive for everybody. Everybody at the table should be able to quickly parse whether you have passed or failed, that kind of stuff. The other reason you roll in the open is in case you forget a modifier that applies. Another player may remember you have that modifier and can remind you to add it to the total or to adjust the total based on that modifier, that kind of stuff. So that's the how, when, and why of rolling dice from my table. Now, as far as re-rolling goes, I just got done telling you I took low cranes. I did a heart. Re-rolls should only happen when circumstances drastically change. If you fail to pick a lock, you've broken your lock pick. You have messed something up. You have caused it to become impossible to pick that lock. You need to justify when you're going to re-roll. And the reason that is because, again, it prevents dice rolling from taking over the story. You need to explain to me how you get your broken lock pick out. How do you adjust trying to push and force the door open? How do you change your approach to charming your way past the guard? Because once you fail, the NPC is going to be aware of what you're doing. The lock is going to be jammed. The stealth is broken. Those things all matter. You need to change the circumstances to make the reroll possible. And if you're not changing the circumstances enough, then you're not going to pick up the dice and re-roll. Because, again, you're just in the same boat. Nothing has changed. You've already failed at the task. Therefore, I'm not just going to be like, okay, fine. I know nothing changed. Go ahead and re-roll. No. Your circumstances have to change. You need to give me a good reason. And really, it comes down to approach. Say you're playing a thief who tries to lockpick his way past a lock, and he can't. He can immediately re-roll if he says, well, you know what, screw it, I couldn't pick the lock, so I'm going to try to ram through the door, force the door open. Okay, that's going to change the roll type because it's going to go from a lockpick skill to probably a strength check of some kind. But you can now do that because the circumstances of what you're doing, the approach has changed. You have changed what you're doing to make the circumstances different. And generally speaking, if you're doing that, you're having better time. And the way I use skills realistically in games, especially skill-based games, really comes down to keeping the story flow moving and giving you complications and giving you consequences and giving you the opportunity through failure to change the outcome of the story. Because, like I said, if you fail at a major event, you're going to have to change your approach and you're going to have to come to that event differently. You're going to have to find a different way into the building. You're going to have to, you may have to get into a fight to get through the guards. You know, there's 1,000 things that can happen, but you got to do that stuff differently. Um, and that's how I handle skill rules. Hopefully this video helps you guys understand a little bit more about my philosophy on dice rolls and skill rolls in particular. Um, and hopefully it gives you something you can use at your table. I really do encourage you to go look up the Burning Wheel rules on skills and skill rolls and skill re-rolls and stuff like that, because they're actually very well done. While I'm not a huge fan of the overall Burning Wheel system, he did put a lot of good things in that system that can be ported over generically to other systems. So that being said, guys, as always, we'll have thoughts, comments, questions, concerns. And as always, use follow 3 rules, no ad hominems, no picking fights, no college dissertations. Other than that, guys, we do hope you guys have fun, and we do hope to see you guys around the game table at some point.